saying contemporaneous. What does that mean?
I don't know what it means in his mind. In my mind, contemporaneous means that it's affecting something that's happening now. And everybody knows, based on the information released, that it is affecting the Ukraine conflict, both with regard to reports on Ukrainian readiness, the status of ammunition, all the way up to what I think is the most damaging part that we've learned so far, is our ability to understand and have access to the Russian military and Russian intelligence. If those things are closed down, that's going to impact our ability to understand what Russia is doing, and then how we as a Western alliance respond to that. So it's very contemporaneous and very damaging.
Well, of course, the big question we're all asking, Mark, is how does a 21-year-old have access to information like this? And when you think about the Edward Snowden case, we need to start watching out for the IT guy now, or what?
Well, yes. In this case, it's a little unclear what exactly he did. Various reports are calling him a person who maintained classified communications systems. And there's a reason to have a security clearance for that. But that doesn't mean that you should have access to the material. And not least of which, and I don't understand, is how he got access to finished products from the Joint Staff and from the CIA Operations Center. This is a problem. I mean, look, we have a problem at DOD with overclassification. But this is an example of another problem we have, which is over-distribution. And I faced this during my tenure as well. It's a big problem.
Yeah. Mr. Secretary, also a question for you regarding the access for a 21-year-old to have. Isn't this the access that a lot more individuals have following 9/11? Is this potentially a moment in time where the U.S. needs to look at ratcheting up that access in terms of who is actually allowed to have it? Maybe the net has been cast too wide.
Oh, absolutely. Look, in this case, again, if he was maintaining communications equipment, I don't know why he would have access to finished intelligence products. But beyond that, even if he did, there's a difference between having access to know and having a need to know. And in this case, it's a stretch to wonder why a 21-year-old and somebody in the National Guard needs to understand what's going on in Seoul with regard to what the national leadership in Seoul was thinking, or the Mossad in Israel. There's no reason whatsoever for somebody to have access to that type of information. That should be kept to the highest levels, to the type of people that I dealt with, to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and others who need to have that access.
So it sounds like a call for new protocol, Mark. I don't know if you see it that way, but you and I spoke at length following the Trump documents case being exposed at Mar-a-Lago. Now, of course, President Biden, you add Mike Pence. It seems like everyone's got classified documents in a closet or a garage somewhere. Is it time for new rules?
Well, with this case, clearly the loop needs to be closed with regard to the number of people having access to it. And then we need to look at our protocols. I mean, one of the things I did when we went through this in 2020 was to make sure everybody got rebriefed on what their responsibilities and duties were. But the third thing is we need to look at our insider threat technology, things that tell us, that give us clues and cues about when somebody's downloading information that they shouldn't, or printing off information that they shouldn't be printing off. That is often a way for us to determine insider threats to the system.
Well, we spoke with Secretary Leon Panetta yesterday about this situation exactly. How does it even happen? It's obvious this individual had hard copies. They seem that they were folded. But don't these documents go in a burn bag? How were they able to leave an office?
Yeah, look, these are great questions. I think this is what the investigation will tease out, is how did he do this? Was he supposed to be supervised? Was he left alone? How did he have access to these materials? Again, he should not have authority to print anything off. So I think we need to get to the bottom of this. I assume the chain of command will be closely looked at with regard to who he was reporting to. But I think the immediate thing is to find out what is the scale and scope of the release, because we need to understand the damage done. And then I want to find out, was he working with anybody, and what motivated him? I hope there's no type of foreign influence going on here, that there was anything like that, because that would be really troubling.
I want to get to you more on the contents of these documents. Mark, the president, again, used the word contemporaneous. With that said, do you believe everything that we're hearing? You mentioned the case with Egypt, for instance, what we learned about South Korea. The administration actually has gone out of its way to say some of this is not true. And there's, of course, a possibility that some of these documents have been altered or doctored from a different actor. Maybe Russia put them back online somehow or led them into the hands of this young man. What's your thought on that? Do they believe that these documents are real?
Well, a few thoughts. Senior officials have anonymously said that they look authentic, that they are authentic. Others have also said that some have been altered. But I also don't think we cannot rule out the fact that maybe the Russians or somebody else slipped other documents into this trove, if you will, to create some type of disinformation. So I don't think we know until we go through each document piece by piece and look at it and verify its authenticity, because you just can't accept anything at face value. You really have to go through it and evaluate each and every one of it.
Yeah, that seems to be a massive concern. The other one, Secretary, is what happens now in terms of what the U.S. says to our foreign allies? What is the response? Do they now trust America, or is this pretty much just, we know you've been spying on us, we've always known you've been spying on us, and it's status quo?
Well, a few things. First of all, the trust factor always takes a lot of time to build back up after you try to explain it. I mean, first of all, most people know everybody's spying on everybody. It's that intelligence is important for people to understand. But I think the sharing of secrets and the fact that we allowed some to be escaped or to let out, leaked, is going to be a problem. We have to rebuild that trust. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the insights we have and access we have to Russian intelligence and the Russian military, it's very likely that those sources and that those things will be burned, and then we have to figure out how to build that back as well. But look, this will take time, but we don't even know the scope and scale of the damage yet, and that'll take some time to do first.